The rent is too damn high. Oh man, I see somebody comments this almost in every video, it seems like. Not in every video, but a lot of times I see the same guy. You know who you are. He always says this in the comments, and it just makes me laugh because number one, it's true, but also it's just like one of those things where something that everybody can relate to, right? Even if you don't pay rent, even if you have a mortgage or whatever, like everybody knows how expensive things are now, and that is like no secret, and it's something that we can all gather around, right? However, there is good news on the horizon for people who are paying rent right now and feel like they've just been getting clobbered with increase after increase over the past few years, because that's going to be over, guys. Like the days of increasing the rents, 5-10% a year or more are completely done. And that is because of the amount of rental inventory we have popping up on the market, which is due to a multitude of different things. You have a ton of rental buildings being built right now across the entire country, number one. You also have a lot of people that own Airbnb properties, for example, that those are no longer profitable. They're turning them into long-term rentals, helping further increase the supply. You also have people huddling up and moving in together because it's so expensive, which frees up even more rental supply. Like we all know that during the pandemic, rent was going up by like 20% a year from 2020 through 2022. So you had like those 3 years right there where rents just exploded 3 years in a row. And that's unsustainable. Just like the rest of our economy is completely unsustainable right now, we're starting to see these trends reverse, guys, and that's good news for everybody. Now, the amount of money that people are spending on rent is still far too much compared to how much money people make, because when you look at this chart right here, it shows you the percentage of renters' income that's going towards rent right now, and the average renter, it's still under 30%. So the renters are still actually in a better financial position right now than recent homeowners who are putting, 38, 40% of their income towards buying a house right now. So way more of a home buyer's money is going into their monthly payment. And that's just the monthly payment side of things, not even talking about maintenance and the upkeep and all the other expenses that come along with home ownership. When you look at this chart, the people that are getting hit the most right now are the people that are being forced to rent, not people that want to rent. They are renting because they have no other alternative. They have the highest percentage of their income going towards the rent right now at about 31%. And then you have at the bottom of this chart people who choose to rent, still about 27% is going towards rent, which is roughly where it should be, I guess you could say. And this is probably one of the explanations of why so many people have been kind of gung-ho on the housing market the last few years and tried to get in to buy, right? Because it's logical to think, well, more and more of my income's going towards rent, so I might as well get in there and buy and have that money go towards my own house, which is not only smart, but a logical decision. The problem is people still trying to do that today are not going to be getting the same results of people that did it 2 or 3 years ago. And that's the real issue, because the reality is, guys, buying a home right now anywhere throughout the country is at least 50% more expensive in most cases than renting is. And so I'm not saying it's impossible to find a better deal to become a homeowner versus a renter right now, but it's damn near close to impossible. And at the same time, even though the amount of these rents went up so much like they did, the actual price for these rental buildings has been falling pretty substantially. When you look at apartment buildings, the sales of apartment buildings as of November of 2023 were down 68% from the same month a year earlier, and prices for these apartment buildings is actually down 12% year over year. So looks like the multifamily apartment building sector of real estate is also crashing, just like commercial office buildings are. And like I said earlier, you don't have to worry about the rent being too damn high for much longer. Why not? Because when you look at this chart right here, what do you see? The construction for multifamily rentals right now is the highest that it's been since at least the 1970s, guys. That is huge right now. When you're talking about bringing new inventory to the rental market, this is a big part of it right now. I've talked about this many times before. You know, we have well over 1 million units under construction right now. In 2023, there was about 300,000 delivered nationwide, which means there's going to be far more coming into 2024. So this is a good time to be a renter in terms of finally getting more options and, you know, price breaks and incentives and things like that from rental companies. According to the real estate firm CBRE, a lot of the rentals that are set to open up in the next 12 months are going to be in Nashville, Austin, Texas, Dallas, Texas, and Atlanta, Georgia. Those are the big four where they're going to see the most deliveries of these new units. People ask all the time, where are these new rentals popping out, Michael? Well, these are the big ones right here, but obviously it's happening all over. I see, you know, if you go in other parts of Florida, you know, throughout the state, drive up 95 or probably even 75 too, you're going to see different apartment buildings and different complexes being built across the state. So it's happening all over the place. The places that have been growing the most are the ones that are getting the construction right now.
We have another hot potato property here listed at $2.29 million, and they listed it back in the middle of November for $100,000 more, so it's already had its first $100K price cut, and when you look at the history, you can see why. Bought in 2020 for $675,000, sold a year later for $1.3 million, and now they want to try to almost double the money once again. Property tax bill here is currently $26,000 a year. The flippers are still trying, but it's not working.
Right now it's being predicted that in cities where they're getting a lot of volume, a lot of these brand new rentals, the price for these buildings can actually be dropping by another 10% this year because of how much is being built right now. And right now it's being reported that investors are sitting on $250 billion, that's about $250 billion, sitting there ready to deploy into commercial real estate, meaning like these apartment buildings, especially as prices start to come down. Clearly, the institutional landlord isn't going anywhere based on these future investment plans. Here's the part of this rental story that everybody needs to pay attention to, okay? Demand for rental housing is still strong, according to investors, right? But it's particularly strong when it comes to demand for single-family homes for rent, which have been more resilient than apartments because, generally speaking, there's less of them available. And when you have lower inventory of anything, it drives the price up, guys. This is the key right here, because everybody likes to complain that all these institutional investors have been snatching up all the homes and, you know, turning them into rentals, right? Everybody's upset about this. But how can you fight this, guys? Well, very simply put, the easiest way to fight it is don't rent houses, okay? Like, you need to vote with your wallet when it comes to everything in life. Doesn't matter when it comes to what type of food you buy, what type of electronics you buy, furniture you buy, just anything. All of your buying habits in general, you know, is like a vote. Every time you buy something and the sales on something goes up, you know, that gives the manufacturer of that product an incentive to continue making more of it. Same thing goes for renting single-family homes, right? If you rent a single-family house instead of an available apartment nearby, that tells real estate investors, like, there's more demand for this, we can charge more for this, let's buy these instead. And I realize that what I'm saying is easier said than done, especially if you're trying to raise a family, but you can't really afford to buy a house, so you're choosing to rent one instead. Or maybe you live in an area like many places in California where renting a house is far cheaper than buying a house. I get it, guys. I understand there are scenarios where it just makes more sense to rent the house than buy it. However, just know that what you're doing is you're telling all the local real estate investors that, yeah, this is going to be a good future investment because this is what people want, right? And so the more people rent, single family homes, the higher the prices are going to go on these things, and the more these institutional investors are going to keep snatching them up. And we can see here by looking at this chart that rents have been coming down. At least the rate of increases has been coming down, just kind of like inflation, right? They say, well, we're only at 3% inflation now. That just means that prices are still 3% higher than they were a year ago, and we know it's much higher than that. And the same goes for rentals here. Like you can see, shortly after the pandemic, rental increases were close to 20%, right? But now, when you get to single family homes, it's more like 2.5%. And apartments have actually fallen, right? And that's because there are more supply of these apartments than there are of the single family homes. And if people continue renting single family homes, then they're going to be in a position where they're going to be charged more for it. It's really simple economics here at play. Now, one thing a lot of younger people are doing right now, which I think is pretty smart, is they are choosing to live with their parents and not pay rent at all in order to save money to buy a house. Now, I think this is smart because you're basically killing two birds with one stone. Not only are you not giving in to paying high rental prices, right, and setting yourself back like that, but also you're putting money away towards your own future to buy your own house. And as long as you stick with that plan and you actually follow through with it, then I think it's a very smart thing to do. And more young people are choosing to do this right now because in 2022, the share of first-time home buyers who moved directly from a friend's or a family member's home into their own home hit 27%, according to the National Association of Realtors. Now that is the highest amount since the National Association of Realtors has been keeping track since 1989, guys. What it is it's a sacrifice. You can make fun or talk down on people who live with their parents, but the reality is they're doing this in order to better themselves and, create a better future for themselves. So it's a temporary sacrifice to get somewhere. The problem is when people say they're going to do this and they use it as like a crutch or an excuse to live with their parents, but they never actually follow through with saving the money and working towards the goal of buying their own home. Because if you have a good job and you're a real working adult, it should be pretty easy to save for a down payment relatively fast when you have a zero rent payment each month. I know that's always been my biggest expense from being on my own as an adult, right, is paying the rent, right? If I didn't have to pay rent for all these years, I would be rich. Even to this day, paying the mortgage is my biggest monthly expense, guys, and I'm sure that's probably the case for just about everybody. So not having to pay that each month can really help you get ahead in life. As of November of 2023, the median rent for a one-bedroom apartment across the country is about $1,500 a month. And we know that that is definitely on the low side when you look at more expensive cities like even here in Miami. Like for example, that median one-bedroom apartment is more like $4,300 a month in New York, right? In San Francisco, it's $3,000 a month. Here in Miami, it's $2,600 a month. Washington, D.C., it's $2,330 a month. So those numbers climb far higher when you're looking at, the bigger, more desirable metros. The real problem though is how far homeownership is being pushed out of reach for young people. Like the average age of the first-time home buyer now is 36 years old, guys. Like I'm 36 years old. And that's, pretty old to be starting with your first house. You know what I'm saying? Like compared to a generation ago, the average age of a first-time home buyer was 29. So it has grown by 7 years due to the unaffordability. And because of that, you have more young adults than ever living with their parents trying to offset these costs. And you also have more people not just deciding to live with their parents, trying to save some money, but also you're starting to see a huge uptick in multi-generational households, where you have mom and dad and their kids and grandma and grandpa all living under the same roof. And literally the amount of multi-generational households has gone up 4x since the 1970s in the United States. So this has been a growing trend for quite some time. This isn't something that happened yesterday, but you can see how much it's continuing to rise. And according to the people that are living like this, about 1/3 of these adults say that they're doing it to care for a family member. That was like a major reason. But 40% of them said that they're doing it because of financial issues. So that's almost half of people that are doing this. And I'd be willing to bet that it's much higher than 40%. That's just the people that were willing to admit that's why they're doing it, right? But beyond caring for the elderly or needing the money to pull together to pay the bills, I can't really imagine why most people would want to live in multi-generational household. And if you think that's bad, that the average age of somebody who's buying right now is 36 years old, in more expensive states like California and Florida, guys, it is actually much worse. In fact, I just found this today, that the average age for somebody to become a homeowner in Florida right now is 42. That's according to Axios. And to show you how much things have changed, in the 1980s in Florida, the average homeowner became a homeowner by the age 30. Now it's 42. In the year 2000, it was 34. So why is this happening? Well, obviously housing is too expensive, but it's just gone up so much, guys. Like, the median home value has literally doubled in the last 10 years, okay? But during that same time frame, wages have only gone up 13.5%. I mean, think about that for a minute. A house can double in a 10-year time frame, but the amount of money that people are making only goes up by 13.5%. So in order for wages to have doubled, that means wages would have had to gone up by 100%. So wages are severely falling behind of where they should be for people to keep up with this. And I still think that to this day, that is the best case of why we're not going to see home prices continue to explode, guys. Like, yeah, you have a lot of rich baby boomers and real estate investors and foreigners that come in and buy our real estate. They can support a segment of the market, but not the whole thing. If you think that's bad in Florida, in California, the average person doesn't become a homeowner until they're 49 years old. Think about that. That's basically out of reach for everybody. When you look at it like that, it almost seems unobtainable for most people. And then when you contrast that with a more affordable state like Iowa, the youngest buyers are about 29 years old over there. And they say, according to this study, Alaska right now is the only state in which the average home buyer is actively getting younger. In 2000, it was 36. And today, as of the 2021 data, is 35. So whoopity-doo, it came down by 1 year. But this is truly an alarming trend moving forward for our country, guys, because as you can see, that average age for people becoming homeowners keeps getting pushed further and further into the future, and in more extreme expensive areas like California and Florida, you know, almost into senior citizen territory. It's getting ridiculous. So if things continue on this trend, it'll come to a point where people cannot own a home, right? And then what everybody keeps saying is you'll own nothing and be happy will eventually become true, except nobody will be happy. And while all this is going on, meanwhile, you have the richest of the richest people continuing to get richer. Because I saw this today about the 10 wealthiest people got nearly $500 billion richer in 2023 when they grouped just the 10 richest people together. It is just shocking, guys. And I wanted to just go over this briefly and mention a few names here. You know, we often tend to idolize rich people. I know when I was a kid, I kind of looked up to like, oh man, you want to be like, you know, back then Bill Gates seemed like he was the richest guy in the world or whatever, you know? And it's like, oh, wouldn't it be awesome to have that kind of money, right? But as an adult, I actually don't feel that way anymore, because when you look at these guys and you see their lives and all the stuff they have to do in order to just maintain this level of wealth, I wouldn't want to be them, you know? I don't care how much money they have. I would just never be able to replace, you know, the value of just being an ordinary person, right? But to put into perspective, look at this. In 2023, the 10 wealthiest people saw a 46% increase in their wealth of about $465 billion. They even beat out the S&P 500 by a ton, because the S&P 500 had an annual gain of 24%, whereas these top 10 billionaires had a 46% increase in their net worth. Here's some of the top ones. Elon Musk, richest guy in the world, right? He went from 137 billion in net worth to 229 billion in just 1 year. Jeff Bezos, he went from 107 billion to 177 billion. $70 billion increase in 1 year. Bill Gates, still on the list, obviously. He went from 109 billion to 141 billion. Mark Zuckerberg, He went from 45.6 billion to 128 billion. So this guy was able to more than double his net worth in 1 year, which is actually pretty impressive, especially when you're talking numbers on this scale, right? When you contrast that with somebody like Warren Buffett, for example, you know, he went from 107 billion to 120 billion. So it only went up 13 billion for him. So clearly there's people out there that are doing pretty well in this economy, but it's not the average person, guys. It's people that already have a tremendous amount of wealth and can just use that money to grow more wealth. Like once you get to a certain point in life, you can just continue using your money to grow more money. And I think the important lesson to be learned here from this is that, you know, it's not necessary to like reach for the stars when it comes to being rich and all of this and having all this money. But rather than be jealous of what these guys are doing and say, oh, it's not fair that they're making all this money and this and that, you know, learn something from it. Learn like, how can I do a couple of things like Jeff Bezos or like Elon Musk in order to, you know, increase my wealth, right? Use it as inspiration, you know, so as fuel to further your own financial situation into 2024. I know that's how I use it, you know, like I don't aspire to be like any of these people, but if I can steal a few little nuggets of wisdom here and there from things that they do to make my life just that much more, a little bit more successful, then that's what I'm gonna do. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.